Greetings, comrades. Let's jump right into the summary of Chapter 9 of Michael Parenti's Inventing Reality. The chapter is titled Doing the Third World, and this opens with a paragraph that if you've watched any Parenti's speeches, it is impossible not to read in his voice and his cadence, where he talks about how the third world is not poor, but it is exploited. Talks about how the goal of the U.S. is not instilling democracy into these places, but it is to make the world a safe place for American corporations, and how the media is very complicit in this goal. Section 1, the Vietnam Apology. This is the largest section of the chapter. It really gets into it. If you want more about Vietnam, specifically about Agent Orange, I have videos from when I got back from visiting last year that you should go and watch. Maybe I'll boost those because we need to keep talking about Agent Orange and the horrible things that the U.S. did to the country of Vietnam, and the things that are the repercussions that the people there are still suffering because of what we did decades ago. So he talks about the corporate media versus the alt media in covering the U.S. war in Vietnam. Basically, from 1945 to 54, the U.S. was supporting the French against the Vietnamese in their fight for independence. 54 was Dien Bien Phu, when the Vietnamese finally beat the French, and they were pushed either out of the country or to the south, where the U.S. had set up their puppet state. This was to the tune of billions of dollars. The U.S. was supporting France in that decade's worth of time, and the American citizens didn't even really know about this going on. Not until the mid to late 50s, when the U.S. actively started putting troops into the southern part of the country. The media completely left out the bombings of Cambodia and Laos, didn't tell people about that, didn't talk about Agent Orange, or just the indiscriminate killings of civilians, specifically women and children. Things like the My Lai massacre were completely ignored. People in the U.S. didn't even hear about that for a full year after it happened, and even then it wasn't something that was really put in the media, and in fact I think a lot of people probably still don't know about it. He went through a few different journalists. One that I wanted to talk about, her name was Martha Gellhorn. She wrote 5 different articles about what the U.S. was doing in Vietnam. She couldn't get them published here. She had to go to UK publications to get these articles published, and then when she tried to go back, the puppet government of South Vietnam denied her visa to return to continue reporting. Let's see, Time Magazine was literally just rewriting the stories that field reporters were sending in. They talked to LBJ, like the editors of Time Magazine, and he got them to fully re-edit or cut stories that he didn't want published. Critical reports of Vietnam were considered unpatriotic. There was just a huge failure to report honestly on what was happening. The TV interviews were always very pro-war. Less than 25% of the interviews about the conflict, if you want to call it that, were people that were even concerned about, the Vietnamese people. And now, when our history books talk about Vietnam, if they talk about the American war in Vietnam, they blow it off as a well-intentioned venture that went awry, or that it was a foolish mistake. It was an oopsie for us to go there and kill hundreds of thousands of people, and send thousands of Americans into the meat grinder as well. Just an oopsie. Sorry. Number 2, murder in Chile. In 1970, Salvador Allende was elected fairly in a fair democratic election, but he was a socialist. So the U.S. media was immediately concerned about his outright communist internal policies, which basically was he was nationalizing their copper mines. These are resources in Chile that were owned by American corporations. Allende decided to nationalize these mines so that the resources could be used to benefit, the people of Chile. The U.S. isn't like that. He increased living standards for the poor, which cut into the profits for the rich, and that is unacceptable. Nixon said that his goal was to make their economy scream. 9/11, 1973, Allende was overthrown in a violent coup. Pinochet and his military followers. The New York Times blamed the victims for it. They were super pro-Pinochet. The U.S. military financed, equipped, trained, advised, and assisted this coup, and the newspapers reported it as no American involvement in Chile. The U.S. media loved Pinochet, say that he brought order to the streets, and the book gets into some really graphic descriptions of horrific things that this government did to the people there. We're not going to talk about it. You can read it yourself. Last one, last section, number 3, stomping on Grenada. In 1983, the U.S. invaded this small island country of Grenada. It had a population of 110,000 people. I grew up in Waco, Texas. That is like the population of Waco, Texas. It's smaller than that. That's insane. The media said that this was a mission to restore democracy. Basically, they said that Cuba was controlling them, right? The evil communist Cubans were controlling the poor people of Grenada. Basically, there were some Cuban troops there, but they were doing like aid work. They were helping build infrastructure, build schools and things. So we can't have that happening, obviously. There was, let's see, so after the U.S. invasion, there was an election in 1984. Every single person that won was a U.S.-backed puppet, and U.S. soldiers were present in the country at the time, which kind of makes it hard to have a free and fair election. So yeah, that was chapter 9. I recorded a short video reading the last paragraph of that chapter. You should check that out too. Cheers.